The last leaf. Sometimes, when life becomes very difficult, people need more than medicine to keep going. They need a reason to believe that tomorrow is still worth waiting for. In a small neighborhood in Greenwich Village, New York, there were many old buildings with narrow streets and small windows. Artists loved living there because the rooms were cheap and people could work quietly in their studios. In one of these buildings lived two young women named Sue and Johnsy. They were both artists. Sue was from Maine and Johnsy had come from California. They met in a small restaurant and discovered that they had the same love of art. Soon they became close friends and decided to share a small studio. Their studio was on the third floor. It had a large window that looked out toward an old brick building. Behind that building was a small yard with an old ivy vine growing against the wall. The two young women spent their days drawing, painting, and talking about their dreams. Johnsy dreamed of visiting Italy one day. She wanted to see the beautiful cities and paint the old buildings there. Sue wanted to become a successful artist and earn enough money to live comfortably. They were young, poor, and full of hope. But one autumn, something changed. A serious illness called pneumonia came to the neighborhood. Many people became sick, and soon Johnsy caught it too. At first, Sue thought Johnsy would recover quickly, but after several days, Johnsy became weaker and weaker. She stayed in bed all day. Her face became pale, and she hardly wanted to eat. Sue did everything she could to help her friend. She cooked soup, brought her medicine, and tried to make her comfortable. She also continued working on a painting because she needed money. One cold morning, the doctor came to see Johnsy. Sue waited outside the bedroom while he examined her. After a while, the doctor came out. He looked worried. "How is she?" Sue asked. The doctor shook his head. "She is very weak," he said. "Her chances are not very good." Sue looked frightened. "Is there anything we can do?" "There is medicine, of course," the doctor said. "But medicine is not the only thing she needs." "What else does she need?" "She needs to want to live." Sue did not understand. The doctor continued. "If a patient believes she will get better, the medicine has a much better chance of working. But if she gives up, there is very little I can do." Sue looked at him sadly. "I will do everything I can." "I know," the doctor said. "Try to keep her thinking about the future. Give her something to hope for." After the doctor left, Sue went into the bedroom. Johnsy was lying quietly in bed. Her eyes were open, but she was looking out of the window. Sue sat beside her. "You need to rest," she said. Johnsy did not answer. Sue tried to smile. "The doctor says you will get better." Johnsy still said nothing. Then she whispered, "Sue." "Yes?" "Do you see that?" Sue looked toward the window. Outside, there was an old ivy vine growing against the brick wall. The leaves had turned yellow and brown because it was late autumn. Strong winds had already blown many of them away. "Yes," Sue said. "I see the ivy." Johnsy continued to look at it. "There are not many leaves left." Sue did not know what to say. Johnsy counted the leaves quietly. 12, she whispered. Sue looked at her. 12 what? 12 leaves. Sue understood. Johnsy was counting the leaves on the ivy vine. She watched them every day. As the wind blew, more leaves fell from the vine. Johnsy whispered, "When the last leaf falls, I will die." Sue was shocked. "What are you talking about?" "I know it." "No, you don't." "Yes," Johnsy said quietly. "The doctor told me I am very sick. I can feel it." "That doesn't mean you are going to die." Johnsy did not answer. She continued watching the leaves. Sue tried to make her laugh. She talked about their plans. She told funny stories. She showed Johnsy pictures from magazines. She even brought her work into the bedroom and began painting there. But Johnsy's eyes always returned to the window. One afternoon, only 10 leaves remained. The wind became stronger. The sky was dark, and cold rain began to fall. Sue closed the window. "Please stop looking outside," she said. But Johnsy said, "Open it." "No, you are too sick. I want to see the leaves." Sue opened the window a little. Johnsy looked outside. The rain continued to fall. Another leaf moved in the wind. It looked as if it would fall, but it stayed on the vine. Johnsy counted 9. The next morning, there were only 7 leaves. Sue became more worried. She went into the kitchen and cried quietly. Then she remembered the doctor. Johnsy was not fighting her illness. She had already decided that she would die. Sue needed to find a way to change her mind. Downstairs, in the same building, lived an old artist named Behrman. Behrman was more than 60 years old. He had lived in the neighborhood for many years. He had a large white beard and a loud voice. He was also an artist. For 40 years, he had talked about painting a great masterpiece. But he had never painted it. He painted small pictures to earn money. But he always believed that one day he would create something truly great. Sue knew Behrman well. She went downstairs to see him. She told him about Johnsy. Behrman became angry. "What nonsense," he shouted. "A young woman cannot decide to die just because some leaves fall from a vine." Sue tried to explain. "She is very sick. She believes that when the last leaf falls, she will die." Behrman looked toward the window. He saw the old ivy vine. Then he looked at Sue. "Is this the girl you are painting for?" "Yes." "She is your friend?" "Yes." Behrman became quiet. Then he said, "I will come upstairs." When he entered Johnsy's room, he saw her lying in bed. He looked at the ivy through the window. Johnsy was very weak. Behrman stood there for a moment. Then he said, "What kind of foolish idea is this?" Johnsy did not answer. Behrman shook his head. "You think you will die when the last leaf falls?" Johnsy closed her eyes. "I know it." Behrman looked at Sue. Sue said nothing. Outside, the wind was becoming stronger. The old artist looked at the vine again. Only a few leaves remained. Behrman did not say much more. He went downstairs with Sue. Before leaving, he looked up at the wall. "The last leaf," he said quietly. That night, the weather became terrible. The wind blew hard through the streets. Rain hit the windows. The temperature fell. Sue tried to keep Johnsy warm. She read to her and talked to her, but Johnsy said almost nothing. At last, Johnsy asked, "How many leaves are left?" Sue did not want to answer. "Try to sleep." "How many?" "3." Johnsy closed her eyes. "The last 3." Sue sat beside her. "Please don't think about them." But Johnsy continued to whisper, "They will fall tonight." The wind became louder. Sue looked out of the window. The branches were moving violently. She closed the curtains. "Please," she said, "don't look outside." Johnsy turned away. After a while, she fell asleep. Sue stayed awake beside her. The next morning, Johnsy woke. She opened her eyes and immediately looked toward the window. "Sue?" Sue was sitting beside her. "What?" "Open the curtains." Sue was afraid, but she slowly opened them. Outside, the sky was gray. The rain had stopped. The ivy wall was wet. Johnsy looked carefully. One leaf was still there. Just one. It was dark green and strong against the gray wall. Johnsy stared at it. "The last leaf," she whispered. Sue said nothing. All day, Johnsy watched it. The wind came again. The leaf moved, but it did not fall. That evening, the leaf was still there. Johnsy looked at it for a long time. Then she said, "Sue?" "Yes?" "I have been a bad girl." Sue looked at her. "What do you mean?" "I thought I would die when the last leaf fell." Sue smiled gently. "But that leaf is still there." "Yes." Johnsy was quiet. Then she said, "It has shown me how wrong I was." Sue sat beside her. Johnsy looked at the leaf again. "It is wrong to want to die," she said. "That little leaf is still fighting to stay alive." Sue held her hand. "Don't talk too much. You need your strength." Johnsy smiled weakly. "Please bring me some soup." Sue almost cried with happiness. "Of course." A few days later, Johnsy was much better. The doctor came again. This time he smiled. "She has a very good chance now," he said. Sue was relieved. The doctor looked at Johnsy. "She needs good food and plenty of rest. Her spirit has changed, and that is very important." Johnsy soon began sitting up in bed. Then she started drawing again. She talked about Italy. She talked about the pictures she wanted to paint. She even began making plans for the future. One morning, she asked Sue about the ivy. "Where is the leaf?" Sue looked at her. She knew the time had come to tell the truth. "There is something you should know." Johnsy looked worried. "The leaf you saw was not a real leaf." Johnsy was confused. "What?" Sue continued. "The last leaf fell during that terrible storm." Johnsy stared at her. "Then what did I see?" Sue took her hand. "Behrman painted it." Johnsy did not speak. Sue told her what had happened. On the night of the storm, Behrman had gone outside with a lantern, a ladder, and his paints. He had climbed the ladder in the cold rain. He had painted a leaf on the wall, exactly where the real leaf had been. He painted it so carefully that it looked real. The next morning, when Johnsy looked outside, she thought the leaf had survived the storm. She believed it was still alive. But Behrman had become very sick that night. The doctor came to see him the next morning. Behrman had pneumonia. His clothes were wet, and his body was very cold. He died 2 days later. Johnsy listened silently. Then she looked out of the window. The painted leaf was still there. She finally understood. The leaf had saved her life. Behrman had spent his last night creating the masterpiece he had talked about for 40 years. He had never painted a famous picture. He had never become a great artist in the way he had imagined. But that night, he painted one simple leaf. It was not painted for money. It was not painted for fame. It was painted because another person needed hope. Johnsy slowly returned to her life. She became stronger every day. She began painting again. She still dreamed of going to Italy. She still wanted to become a better artist, but she never forgot the old man downstairs. Years later, whenever she saw an ivy leaf, she remembered Behrman. And on the old brick wall, the painted leaf remained. It looked simple, it looked small, but for Johnsy, it was more than a leaf. It was a sign that life could continue even after the darkest night. And for Behrman, that little leaf became the greatest painting he had ever made. Thank you for watching.